Hello and welcome to Resilience and Relationships R&R. I am so excited you're here. I am Stephanie Olson and I'm with
Rebecca Saunders.
Yes. Okay. And we are doing real talk for real life. I think that's what it is. I don't know. We should probably figure out what our tagline is because
So if it's not, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we have been having so much fun doing these podcasts. I just love it because it's just like a conversation.
It's just chatting with a friend while,
Yep,
tons of other people listen in, and it's great.
I know. I love it. And I figured out how we can do call in later. So we're going to have to offer that, like do a live. We'd have to do it live, obviously, because right now nobody knows, um, you know, that we're
Sounds so
doing
top.
this right now. Yes, it's very top secret at any given time that we're doing this podcast. I was doing a training for a group of educators, and we started to talk about nonprofits and how to determine if a nonprofit was doing good work. Like, this is who I'm going to give money to. And I thought that would make a really interesting conversation because the guy said, the way I determine who I'm going to give money to with a nonprofit is I look at how much they're giving to programming versus administration. And that sounds reasonable, but I actually had to counter him a little bit. So I thought it would be an interesting thing to have a discussion about.
Yeah, I think so, because for a lot of people, that sounds perfect. That sounds like a good metric.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not always the case.
No. And really what I would say, and I'm going to talk about why it's not necessarily a good metric, but I think what I would say is you want to give to an organization that is completely transparent with what they do with their funding, with their 990s. That's the tax, thing that we file at the end of the year. Our just where that money goes, our P&Ls and things like that. And if you look at our website, you're going to see all the financials on there. But not everybody does that. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but it would be because for a nonprofit, all of that is legally, we have to provide it if somebody asks. And I think that's important. So here's why I said, I'm not sure if that's the best metric. Because number one, programming versus administration. If you were to look at our balance sheet or our P&L, which by the way is a profit and loss statement, if you were to look at that, yes, you would notice that it would look like a lot of our money goes to administrative costs. However, that is because we are the actual program. And so we're the ones training, we're the ones writing the curriculum, we're the ones training facilitators and all of that stuff. And so we are actually all we do. Yes, truly. I mean, I guess we have marketing, which is kind of could be considered both depending on what the marketing is doing. And we do have some operations things because obviously we write grants and, we have an director of operations who does all things operations. What we don't have is a building. So we all work remotely. We have no overhead when it comes to our actual facilities, even though I am constantly getting emails from people saying, hey, we'd like to clean your business or something like that. Really? Okay. Well, you could come to my house. Right. Exactly. I guess you're more than welcome to clean my house. But we don't have that overhead. And we really work on a shoestring budget, our organization, because we really do focus on that programming piece, and that's where we put our money. But if you were to just look at our budget, that's the word I'm looking for, it would look like we are just paying administration, because it might look like it's in the form of salaries and things like that. But
Makes
we're it. Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense.
So then the
So,
person who told you this would probably see our organization on paper and think, oh, well, I would not want to support that. When in
yes.
reality, it's very in line with his values.
Exactly. Now, here's the other thing that I have a question about and that I shared, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about nonprofits and where the money should be going and what that looks like. Because what I hear most often is 80% should be going to programming, 20% should be going to administration. Sure, I get that, right? But my question is, why? Why should we, as people doing this nonprofit work, which is really hard, and we are running a business and we're hoping to save lives? I mean, I think that
Right.
that really, if you look at most nonprofits, that's the mission, to save lives.
And another, that's, yeah, what
Yeah,
everybody's looking toward.
exactly. And yet, we should not get paid much because we're a nonprofit. And that's where I struggle a little bit. I don't understand why. And really, that's, being a nonprofit does not mean you can't profit.
Say more about that because I was so surprised when I learned that.
Yeah. Nonprofits absolutely can profit. And in fact, I know of nonprofits, and we're hoping to grow our reserves so that we have a strong amount of reserves, that if there is a financial crisis, we can still pay the staff, we can still do what we need to do. That's what reserves are for. And I know organizations that have $100,000 in reserves, which I think a lot of people would be like, what? I think that's amazing. And if you can do that, the difference is that a nonprofit's profits all have to go back into the organization. So what you can't do is, simply line people's pockets with money. You can't go on extravagant vacations. Obviously, you can't, it would be frowned upon if I decided that we were going to have a team building time and we all went to the Bahamas for a week and it was
Oh,
all
that just
inclusive
sounds
and paid
lovely.
for. It does sound great. Yes. Let's just dream
That
about that for a minute.
anyone out there wants to sponsor a team building trip to the Bahamas, let us know.
That would be awesome. Yes. Yes, thank you. No, but that is what, and when we see nonprofits get hit, we had a situation in our hometown where one of the one of the one of the nonprofits, and it's a national nonprofit. Here's where it also gets tricky. They found out that the top executives were making over $100,000 a year, and they were getting extreme bonuses. That's where it starts to get really problematic. And then they actually bought their board or their leadership team or a trip to the World Series to watch the Cubbies play and like I mean, it was like extravagant.
It's a little out there.
Yes, they got caught, and it was all over the news. The CEO got fired. Now, here was the hard thing. It was a national organization that had other organizations that are self regulated. So, for example, there's a national headquarters, but then there's a something here, a nonprofit here that is its own nonprofit with its own board, with its own CEO, with its own dollars. And then even in another area in town, there is the same nonprofit, quote unquote, but totally different governance. So what happened was that this nonprofit that's well known, I'm not going to say it, but this nonprofit, people were like, well, I am never going there. I'm never giving my money there again. The problem was it was only that one nonprofit that was using money inappropriately. The
So
rest of the nonprofit, yes. Yes, the rest of the nonprofits were like, well, we didn't do that. So I think it's really what happens is one nonprofit blows it, and across the board, people are like, well, I'm not giving to any nonprofits, or
creates
I'm
that
going to,
distrust.
it does. It does. And I would say that most nonprofits are good nonprofits, or at least trying to use their money appropriately, is what I'd say. Whether they're good at what they do, that's a whole other conversation. But I think most nonprofits use their money appropriately, not necessarily wisely, but at least they use the funds appropriately, most. But there are certainly those bad apples.
As with anything. Yeah.
Exactly. So I thought it was just an interesting conversation, but also I heard somebody who runs nonprofits and also kind of is a nonprofit leader say, why in the world should somebody who's working for a nonprofit get the really crappy chair while the executive in a corporation gets the ergonomically, I can never say that word right. Well, how do you say that? Ergonomically. Thank you.
Myself.
I like, you did good. You did good. But why should we get the chair with the holes in it? I mean, like literally all the chairs
The
we
leftover donated.
they're
Falling
all
up.
donated. Yes. When we had our building or we rented a space, literally every chair everybody sat in was a donated chair we got from another nonprofit. Some of them were falling apart, some of them were good, some of them not so good. But it's all about those donations. And I guess that would be my question. Why? Why should nonprofits make money?
Well, and that's even like a joke more than once. Someone's, oh, what do you do for work? I moved to a new state and I'm getting to know everybody so many times. What do you do for work? Oh, I work for a nonprofit. I do this, whatever. So you don't make much, huh? Like it's just a joke. Okay.
Yeah, well, and
I just,
go ahead.
yes. I mean, that stereotype is generally true, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think it's weird that we just accept that.
Yes, that I agree. Now, I will say we are very underpaid. I mean, we are, when you look at even when you look at nonprofit to nonprofit, like we're underpaid and we're working on that. But when funding is tight, and right now we are in, economically a very difficult time, and I don't know
Yeah.
everyone, and I don't know a single nonprofit that is doing well right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, we are rolling in the donations. I've not heard that from anyone. And so it's a hard time for the nonprofit world all the way around. But I do think that is something when if you can give to a nonprofit and they're transparent about their money, they'll answer any questions, they'll and ask them, how much what does it look like? I mean, if you want to know how much do you give to programming versus administration, sure, absolutely. And I think that would look like if I got paid 80%, or you and I, our leadership team got paid 80% of our budget and 20% went to the work we did. Yeah, that would be problematic. That would be problematic. But I think as long as they're answering those questions and you can ask those questions, I think it's really important to ask those questions because you want to know where your money goes. But just yeah.
Like if you called one of us today and asked,
Yeah.
"Hey, I want a breakdown of how you're spending your money." I mean, like that's not offensive at all. It's okay.
No.
Like let's sit and have a talk about this. And I think
Yes.
that that's the way that pretty much any nonprofit who's trying to use those funds appropriately would respond. Like, sure, let's talk
Right.
about it.
Right.
It's not an
Exactly.
offensive way.
Especially if you're a donor or if you want to donate, I mean, that is a totally appropriate question. Probably if you're just some random schmo off the street
That would be
saying,
a little weird.
then I'd probably say, go.
At all. But what
here's here's my financials on the website. Take a look. Yeah, it's yeah, so nonprofit work is weird, I think, but I do think people think like, yeah, no, they shouldn't be giving any money to administration when also who's doing the work? I mean, you have to have some money for operations or you can't operate.
well, and how many times have you seen individuals who love their job, they're doing this important work, and then they leave a nonprofit because I can't support my family on this,
I've
you
seen
know?
it,
And
unfortunately, way too much.
then, I mean, honestly, it's hurting the work. It's not, it's bigger than just that one person.
Right.
Because yes, we can look at it on the surface as okay, that person chose a different job. That's great for their family. But what about the work they were doing? What about the impact they were having? If you want to support that cause, you've got to support the people doing the cause, doing the work.
Mhm.
I said that
Yeah.
weird.
No. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, it is very interesting. And I do think, again, that whole idea that nonprofits can't profit. The other thing I would say is all nonprofits should have some sort of an income. I think there's an idea that nonprofits can't have income. Like, I can't sell something. And that is not only a fallacy, but I think as a nonprofit who is diversifying funding, which is important, that is one of the things I recommend to all nonprofits. What is your piece of income that is completely dependent on you with your services as opposed to a donation or a grant?
That's so smart because donations, grants, I mean, those things are never guaranteed. And you never know when hardship's going to strike and people are not able to give. I mean,
Mhm.
you've got to have some kind of other thing at play helping you.
You do. Do you remember COVID?
Yeah.
Okay, that was weird that I said it like that. Okay. So, yeah, it was some time ago, but I actually was at some place and the person asked who was alive when 9/11 hit and or who wasn't alive when 9/11 hit, and so many people raised their hands. This was an audience of adults and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm old. Yeah, well, at least you were alive. I appreciate that about you. Thank you. So someday they'll be like, were you alive when COVID hit?
Oh, that's
So I know we're not quite there. I mean, I guess babies, but anyway, neither here nor there. So when COVID hit, the federal government and the states were very good about providing funding for nonprofits who were doing good work. And you had to apply for a grant and you had to make a case. I'm not talking about like the PPP loans. Those were important too. And now we're seeing people get busted because they fraudulently applied for PPP loans and lied. And yeah, that's insane to me. But So I'm not even talking about the PPP loan. I'm talking about the actual CARES Act loans, or not loans, but grants that they provided. And so we applied specifically for a grant for COVID that was for immediate needs. Okay. So immediate needs, applied for the grant. We received the grant for immediate needs, and it took over 6 months to get it.
Glad you got it immediately.
Yes, it was so immediate. Yeah. And it was one of those things that the whole purpose of the grant was, we're going to shut down if we don't get funding. And so they were like, yep, immediate needs grant. And we were so excited. We received it. And we were struggling because we're like, okay, hey, remember? And they kept, I think it was state funding or government funding, but they were like, hey, sorry, we know that was supposed to come out this month, but this is what's going to, and then we kept getting emails and kept getting emails. Finally, when it was awful. Finally, when we received it, we're like, thank goodness. But that was a scary time. And I think now is a scary time with funding.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That even when you apply for a grant, you get it. That doesn't mean you immediately get that money, and you never know
Rarely.
how long you'll wait.
Yeah.
I think
It
that's a
could be,
misconception out there too. That even I don't know. I thought you get a grant, you get that money that day. I don't know what I used to think about all that, but
well,
yeah,
yeah,
not
that
really work.
makes, yeah, it can be months before you actually, it can be months that you hear whether you receive the grant or not. And then it could be months after that before you receive it. So it can be, you have to really plan for that stuff because it can be really challenging. That reminded me, because, we're experiencing all of the federal freezing and stuff like that. So this is kind of a dated podcast because we're going through that right now. But we haven't had any federal funds frozen yet. However, the federal funds we receive, we can't access. So we have a federal grant still going on, but we can't get the money. I know. It's like, I think people don't understand how challenging it is. And it's not just nonprofits right now that are struggling. Small businesses are struggling. And there was just an announcement of a restaurant that had 2 locations in our area. They were going to open a third one, and they were just hit. And they were like, we've decided we're going to close all of our stores. It's really sad. So I think the bottom line with nonprofit work is that just ask questions, right? I mean, know that it's definitely challenging work. And if you have questions, go back to the episode I did some time ago. Do you want to start a nonprofit? Don't. But we do great work. I love what we do. I love working with, obviously, Rebecca, but also the rest of our team is unbelievable. We have an amazing team, but it is hard work, and it is not always, funding is not always a given. And so,
I saw this statistic somewhere. This sentence is like no information in it, but I saw the statistic somewhere that said something. No, it's talking
that's amazing. I saw that same thing.
oh, no, it was talking about the number of nonprofits that start and then within the first few years close, because it is so much more challenging than people realize. And I can't remember what number that was, but I remember it shocked me as being a little high.
So, yeah, it's not a ton. I think within the first 5 years, 12% of new nonprofits cease operations. So they stop. 12%, which, I suppose, but within the first 10 years, around 30% of nonprofits fail. Yeah.
which is
That's a,
unfortunate.
yeah. And it's a big number. I mean, that's a big number when you think about, especially nonprofit. And you talk about nonprofits. Some of these nonprofits, like they have one employee and all the rest are volunteers, or, they have all volunteers. There's no staff person. So you have to be pretty dedicated to run a nonprofit. And I think that when you look at that stat, that 30% fail within the first 10 years, that's a lot. We're still here. Yay.
I think it's because people who start nonprofits are typically very passionate about the issue,
Mm,
realize all the things that go on behind the scenes of how to run that. And I know for
yeah.
me, there's so much I learned just from being here for almost 2 years now, and that I had no idea. I know, almost two
That's
years.
amazing. I love that. That makes my day. Yeah. Yay.
And I think that's why, like, very knowledgeable about the issue, the
Yeah.
problem they're trying to solve, very passionate about that. But there's so much that goes on behind the scenes just trying to get your nonprofit functional.
Well, and I think the other thing is that there's a lot of people who start nonprofits who are passionate about it, but don't have a business bone in their body. And instead of hiring an executive director to run the organization, they think, well, I have lived experience, so I can do this. And I mean, we've talked about this. I have lived experience in domestic violence. Starting a domestic violence shelter would be the worst thing I could do, because that is not my gifting to run one, nor would I have any idea how to do it, nor am I that's not my bag. And so just because I have experienced that doesn't mean I should do that.
Let other people handle the roles that they are more adept for, and
Mhm.
kind of
That
handle
go
the things you're good at. Yeah, it takes a
Yeah, that
team.
it does take a team. That goes back to my whole let go to grow idea, which that would be a good conversation too,
It
because
would.
and I think the other mistake a lot of nonprofit founders specifically make is just they want to hold on to every piece, and no one can do it quite like I can, or I need to be involved in this, I need to do it, and so they're not willing to let go. And that is, I get it, but what freedom when you actually do to do what you're supposed to be doing instead of trying to do everybody else's job.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're holding on, then it can't grow past where you are. You need to back
Yeah.
up, and that
So,
makes sense.
yeah. So I think it's an interesting conversation, but yeah, I think I agree that if you want to give to a nonprofit, I think you should absolutely check them out and find out what they're doing with their funding, and then talk to them. But know that most nonprofits, I believe, are doing the best they can with the finances they have. Most, again, not all, but most. And just make sure that the money's going to exactly what they say it is.
Absolutely. If there's something specific that you want to support, you can always offer a targeted donation too. You
That's
know,
true.
that's an option
And
of,
then
hey, this one piece of what you're doing, I'm really passionate about that. I'd like to give this amount of money toward that piece.
yeah. And if you earmark that, they have to spend the money on that. I have heard I did hear a story. One of my friends gave money to a small nonprofit, and they actually took that money and put it into another pot so that person would match a donation. And it's like, wait, no, that money was supposed to go to this. You can't do that. So it's also knowing the laws.
You need to know if you're going to run a nonprofit.
It is. So, yeah, I think that's a good, quick conversation, but I think it's an interesting one because I think a lot of people have some questions about nonprofit. Where does money go? And what does it mean to be a nonprofit? Does it mean you can't profit? No, you actually can. The money just needs to go back into the organization. So, yeah, anything else you'd add?
I just think anyone listening, if you have questions or you'd like to know what types of questions to ask, email us and
Yeah,
just reach out and we'll have that conversation more in depth one on one.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you. I think that was short but sweet, and you get some R&R. See you next time.